Hi, yeah, I'm Darren. I run a web development company in Bangkok, in Chitlom, and we specialize in bespoke web development and mobile apps. We're looking for geeks, nerds, anybody who really enjoys coding. Everybody in our company is a programmer. We don't do marketing, we don't do design. So we're really looking for people who have passion in programming and development. And people who come for interviews, we're really looking for geeks and nerds, basically. I think that term is more accepted now than it used to be. The skills that we're looking for is really logical thinkers, people who can pick up any programming language. It doesn't necessarily have to be like PHP, it could be Python, JavaScript, anything really. Part of our interview process is actually testing their logic, and we have a basic templating system that they have to build. It takes about 15 to 30 minutes, and it shows us, are they thinking about how to connect the data together? And there's actually about 20 to 30 different ways that I've seen it done now. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes just a complete disaster. But it really shows us if they're a logical thinker. A soft skill that we always try to push with the guys once they're on board and they're working for us is just we work with tasks in Jira. And what we really want from people is just to push it that little bit extra further. So there might be a description of what needs to be done, but actually what we want to see is just a little bit extra done, and that may not even be visually, that might be done through programming. So we use Bitbucket, so we get emails when a commit has been pushed to the server, and it's very easy for us to kind of go in and see what lines have changed and just have a quick overview. And it's really nice when a programmer has cleaned some indenting or thrown some documentation in or kind of refactored some code that wasn't necessarily part of the task that they had to do. That's a really, really good skill that I really see if I see my employees doing that, I straight away say that's a really good job, and that's something that I will reward them with. I think we're looking for the technology, but most of all I think I'm looking for flaws in the resume. When someone has a resume and it's listing from some certain technologies such as C# and Java and crazy languages like assembler, and then they come down to things like PHP and Ruby on Rails and all of the kind of Node.js and JS frameworks, it kind of, I want to dig into those and find out if they've actually just done them for an hour at home or they've actually done a project. So when I see a resume that has a few key technologies that we want, then that makes me feel a little bit better that they're actually taking those languages seriously, and they're not just playing around with them in their spare time, and they actually have a project. Apart from that, nicely set out, clean resume, not really too worried about their education, but I want to sit down, talk to them and really find out what they're about. I've had some really terrible resumes come through before that look awful, but actually in fact we've probably employed them and they're working with us still right now. So maybe in Southeast Asia it's a little bit different with resumes. Maybe in Europe a bad resume ends up in the bin straight away, but I give them a chance, and that's worked out really well for us actually. So the interview is done into 3 sections. First part is just understanding what they've done and understanding their history and going through the resume with them. The second part is test questions. So we ask questions such as what is the difference between double equals and triple equals, and we see what their answer is. Sometimes their English might not be as clear, but I can kind of see from their body language and everything if they do understand it, and if they kind of explain it in a certain way, I'll give them 3 ticks straight away to say, that's a good answer. Then we go to other things like, can you explain best as possible what asynchronous programming is? And that's quite a tough question for people who have not done asynchronous programming, you know, in such things like JavaScript and React and things like that. But it's a good question to ask just to see what their English skills are like, and what, you know, maybe they'll have a bit of a stab in the dark, and you can see if they're having a stab in the dark. The other things that we do is we actually have a practical test that I mentioned earlier, which is building a basic template form. So there's 3 or 4 files. It's generally done in PHP. And they can use Google, they can basically sit there for 15 to 30 minutes, and like I said, they do it, I've probably seen 20 to 30 different ways it's been done, sometimes good, sometimes really bad, and that gives me a really good judge of what their logical skills are. We also ask other general questions like, how far away do you work, do you live from work? How long does it take them to commute into the office? We're pretty lucky, we've got an office in Chitlong, which is very central Bangkok, so it's very easy for people to get to work, but I don't really want to commit for people to spend an hour and a half getting into work. I think it's a drain on the system, and I don't really want people to do that. I prefer them to have a job closer to their home, and we ask little questions like that to get an idea of who they are. In Southeast Asia, for me, I'm still trying to learn Thai. I'm not perfect at it, but unfortunately it's going to be English for a programmer in our sector, because they have to be able to find the information as fast as possible. Programming is quite a lot faster than what it was many years ago. We didn't have Google, so you had to get the books and documentation, and now you've got Stack Overflow. So I think for me it's a half decent grasp of English. You find a lot of people who come in for interviews can read and write very good English. Their speaking might be not as good. I can't criticize because my Thai is terrible. So for me, for the actual practical work and actually getting the job done, there does have to be some good English skill. The second thing that is nothing to do with language or location is patience. Projects take a long time. And I think a lot of people don't realize this, is you can work on a startup, and we've been working on a startup now for 4 years, and we've got traction, we've got sign-ups, and it's going in the right direction. 4 years is a long time, but 4 years is not the finish, it's not the end. We're getting a product that we're proud of that is working now for our customers, but now it's working, now we've got to keep taking it forwards. So a typical exit from a startup or when you're creating a web product is they say 5 to 7 years. You've got to start from the first year up to the 5th year, but even after it's sold, you've got to keep working on it. You know? So the system as a project manager and maybe a lead developer as well, you've got to stay on that for a long time. You've got to be dedicated to it. You've got to keep entertaining yourself. So patience is a really, really big thing for programmers. I've seen many programmers who don't have patience, and you know, after 3 or 6 months they get bored, and that's not good for commercial programming. If they want to go off and do their own startup as well, they're going to just have to get used to it, because that's the reality of it. Personally, I don't care about what operating system people want to use, don't really care about what text editor they want to use, get the job done, that's it really. But as a manager, we use such tools as like Trello and Jira and Google, Google apps like the email and docs and storage and things like this. And that's pretty much it. I don't want to start throwing too many products at management. I think it's not that hard. We have physical things as well, like post-it notes on the wall which have Jira numbers on them. But yeah, I like to keep it simple. My guys can install whatever operating system they want on their computers, whatever they feel comfortable, any flavor of Linux, or if they want to use Windows or OS X, it's totally up to them. Yeah, so I think preferences really kind of restricts people. I don't want to say that I am an Android user and an Apple user or a Windows user or whatever. There's no point thinking that way. If you get the job done, who cares at the end of the day? I think the biggest mistake is developers going too fast. They need to slow down when they first start on something. They've got to think it all the way through, and what can happen is if the program is going too quickly, the code starts to become bad quality. So I think it's about slowing the programmers down and making sure that they're doing good quality work. Another very common mistake with programmers is do not repeat yourself dry code. That really kind of locks into being a programmer, I think. If you know how to do dry code, not repeating the same functionality more than once, then I think that makes you a much better programmer, but that takes time and it takes patience, and you have to read a lot and you have to understand, do I break this function into one central function, or do I have to break it apart? Do I abstract it? Do I extend it? And all these kind of things. So I think it's understanding where that level is. It's understanding where you draw that line between productivity and just messing around and doing something that's absolutely perfect. And finding that line takes a long time, and sometimes as a manager I have to try and get the developers to understand where that line is for them, so we can actually get something out by the end of the day. I still feel like I haven't achieved much. I feel like I've got a lot more to achieve. So I'm never really too content. I think even if I do sell a startup, or we make a nice big famous startup or whatever, I feel like that still won't be the end of the journey. But so far, I think from turning into a programmer to a manager has been my biggest achievement. And yeah, I think that's been a really cool learning curve. Understanding how to work with the employees, how to keep them happy, and yeah, managing and using various tools and opening up discussions with staff to make it better for everybody, really. And I do kind of miss programming occasionally, but it's something I wanted to move into management in the last couple of years, and I think that transition's going well, and I'm just looking for that next thing now. I think the first tip is to get into the libraries, such as like Ruby on Rails, jQuery, CodeIgniter, whatever you've got at hand basically. Don't just install it and forget about the library. There is some amazing code in the library. And you've got to remember, the libraries are coded by other programmers. So spend that time, get into the library. If you've got a bug, maybe it's not your code, maybe it's the library. Maybe you've picked up some bleeding edge library that has only been released in the last couple of months. You're going to have to get into the library. So I think that's my first tip, is really get into the library. Don't just accept it at face value. Don't just install jQuery and kind of like start using it. Spend that time, go into it, figure out how does it select a particular element in the document. I think you're going to learn as a programmer. It's going to make you 100 times better as a programmer. For example, like musicians, to get better at music, you watch other people play music. To get better at golf, you watch other people play golf. If you look at other people's code and there's an unlimited amount of code out there, you're going to get better, and it's just going to subconsciously go in. So that's my first tip. Second tip would be do it. Don't just mess around. Actually get those libraries installed or whatever else, and start putting something together and get it uploaded. That's the most important thing I really want to see, especially if you're coming for an interview. Maybe you don't have too much commercial experience, or the commercial experience that you've been working in a team of 4 or 5 people, and you can't really put a name to some piece of code that you've actually done. But you can always go out, build something quite quickly nowadays and upload it. So that's what I really want to see, is I want to see people who actually do it rather than talking about it all the time, or fill up their resume with X, Y, and Z technologies. Actually do it, upload it, and play around with it. It's the only way that you're going to get better. Fail and keep failing, and I think that's the whole startup philosophy, is fail until you make it, or something like that, or fake it until you make it. But I think the more you do, the more that you kind of go, right, I'm bored of it, I'm going to move on to the next thing. That's fine. Every developer does that. Every developer has their own little startups, but just do it. That's the most important thing. Third one is code. And I keep talking about libraries and do it and things like this. Put the logic in. Don't just expect the module that you're installing to actually do everything or do everything that your customer wants it to do. For example, there's a lot of Ruby on Rails modules that you can install and you can start using, like device and user sessions and tagging and whatever else. But it doesn't mean that it's going to fit in exactly with your system. So fork it, put it into your code, put the actual module into your repository or do a sub-repository and actually code it, change it, or use your own module, learn from that, use it as a template and actually code it. Don't just take things off the shelf, put it all together and expect your customer to be happy or your end customers, the people who are going to be signing up to the website. Modify it, code it, create the logic. Don't just leave it a skeleton code and put the libraries on. Actually put some logic in there. That's what a programmer is, and that's what we do. My fourth tip would be to talk to customers. Learn how to communicate between developers and customers and talk at a customer level. Sometimes I find myself a little bit pedantic. I still am a programmer, but that kind of works with me. It gets the job done and it stops the customer getting bad quality work. They may ask for something, but they may not ask for it 100% clearly. So I'm not going to just take what they have and what they want and then deploy it and do it. I'm going to kind of challenge it, devil's advocate, whatever. And we're going to pull it apart and agree to do something. So I think that communication between the customers and the programmers, or even just yourself if you're a freelancer, is a really, really huge industry at the moment. Everybody, especially in Bangkok, is after a CTO. I probably get at least one email or phone call or something a month asking me to take part of a new project. And sometimes they just send an inquiry and you find out that they're actually after a CTO. They don't have a CTO. And every startup, every technical startup, and it's probably going into many other sectors now where you need that CTO. And if you're a programmer and you're a decent programmer and you can talk to customers, the value of that is just, it's one of the highest values at the moment, and I think it's just going to keep going up and up and up, because the lack of people who can actually do that is becoming apparent. And I think, yes, if you want to be a CTO, go towards that. Understand how to talk to the developers, understand programming first of all, get at least 3 to 4 years under your belt of actually programming day to day, and then learn how to speak to customers, or if you just naturally have it. I think that's a massive skill at the moment. The fifth skill is patience. I think I've mentioned this already, and I think it's one of the biggest things. Like I said, startups take 5 to 7 years roughly to exit, and you got to do it. You got to do those 5 to 7 years and longer. If you can't, then don't do this industry. Some people, the unicorns and whatever else, they do pop up after a year and they sell out after the second year or something like that. That's still 2 years. That's still quite a long time. That's day in, day out. You've got to keep doing it. And I think if you can show that persistence and you can show that you've got that dedication to do it, then you're increasing your chances of success and luck. And I think if you can increase your chances of success and luck, then do it, because you might end up being a wealthy person or an extremely happy person, sometimes both. So I think patience is one of the biggest things.